Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim. A mistake some people make is they take only or exclusively or singly an intellectual approach to deen. So they try to understand deen only on the basis of their mind, and they don't realize that ultimately deen is a matter of the heart. In the Qur'an al-Kareem, Allah Ta'ala is addressing our heart. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was gifted by Allah Ta'ala with a pure and noble and beautiful heart, and his heart won over the hearts of the Sahaba Kiram. The vast majority of people who convert to Islam today, when you ask them their story, it's a story of the heart. Along the way, there will be some small triggers that took place in their mind, some decisions that took place in the mind, but ultimately, if you try to track their journey, it was a journey of their heart. So there also must be an understanding of the spiritual aspects of Islam. Now, for a person, they do all three, right? History, knowledge, and spirituality. When you combine all three, you get this multi-dimensional, colored, robust, depth picture of the Deen of Islam. And that's also something that unfortunately is lacking in many people today. So that's the overall approach that we're going to take to this course. The second slide, if you look at the next slide, what are you showing? I'm already done with approaches and historical aspects. The next thing of study of religion is the first way to do it is faith-based. Faith-based, and the second is secular. What does it mean? In the Western University, they have developed two models of studying religion. In fact, there are actually three models. So I'll give you a perfect example. One model is purely faith-based. Sometimes in fancy English they call that a confessional study of religion. That means that those people who confess, who profess their belief in that scripture and that prophet, they try to go in an academic study of religion. But that academic study of religion obviously has a limit, because they're not in that course of that study, they're not going to question the existence of Allah Ta'ala, that they've accepted on Iman. They're not going to question whether Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was really a prophet or not. That's already been decided by their Iman. That's not actually a matter of study and inquiry. Those are the first principles that they assume and take for granted in their heart, and on that platform they want to study their deen. So in fancy English, this is called a faith-based or confessional study of religion. The second end is secular study of religion. A secular study of religion doesn't just entail, but it demands, it necessitates that you don't bring your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, belief that Qur'an is Kitabullah, belief that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet and messenger, you don't bring that to your study of religion. You approach religion with a quote-unquote, in their terms, a quote-unquote open mind. That means that your mind is open to disbelief. Your mind is open to the possibility that Allah Ta'ala doesn't exist. Your mind is open to the possibility that the Qur'an may or may not truly be the Word of God. Your mind is open to the possibility that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu was a prophet or he wasn't. This is the secular study of religion. So for example, most people in the US and UK, rather the US is a better example, who study in departments of religion, most of the faculty and students aren't really believers in any particular religion. Many of them are atheists. And the ones who are believers, and there's quite a number of them as well, they make it a point to divorce and separate their belief from the classroom, to separate their belief from their lecture, to separate the belief from their writing. And literally, it's a very conscious effort to try to de-spiritualize their study of religion. So that's one way of studying it. Now, interestingly, in America, there's a third way of studying. To give you an example, there's still, although most people don't know about it, most people in Pakistan don't know, in America there are madrasas. There are a lot of madrasas. They're called seminaries. And they're very prominent seminaries. There's the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. There's the Catholic Theological Seminary. There are all types of Presbyterian, Lutheran, Baptist, different denominations of Protestantism seminaries. And there's some very, very well-renowned seminaries. A few of them even have affiliation with top universities. One seminary in Chicago, the Graduate Theological Union, has an affiliation with the University of Chicago, one of the top 5 schools. There's another seminary near Berkeley that has affiliation with the University of California, Berkeley, another top 10 school in the US. Inside the seminary, they pursue a faith-based and confessional study of religion. Then at some universities, a handful of them, particularly Harvard, Yale, and Chicago, where they have departments of religion, which do the secular study of religion, then they may have seminaries outside the university system, which do the confessional study of religion. Harvard, Yale, and Chicago have made another school, which is called the Divinity School. The School of Divinity, we call it Div School for short. In the School of Divinity, a new approach is taken, trying to combine the faith-based confessional study of religion along with those elements of the secular study of religion that are not critical or skeptical to matters of belief. So you can say combining a faith-based and an academic approach, but willing to incorporate that level of academics that does not critique or call into doubt one's very foundations of belief. So this is a method I will be taking with you in the next 5 days, what in America we would call a divinity school approach. So I won't be following a department of religion approach, nor will I take a pure seminary theological madrasa approach. We're going to adopt what I call the div school approach. This is actually something that's extremely lacking in Pakistan. In Pakistan, we just have the two things. We have madrasas, and we have certain fact, especially in the elite universities, such as LUMS and IBA, most of the faculty who teach religion aren't bound by the faith-based approach. You will find varying levels of Iman in different professors of Islamic studies and Islamiyat, and obviously that's a matter that's between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they have also chosen to adopt a secular approach in terms of their teaching, and they often try to divorce their faith from their teaching. All right? I don't feel there's any need to do that. Or at the very least, if one would say that, okay, the secular university should operate on that principle, but we still need institutes that combine both. We need institutes that have what I explained to you in America is called the Divinity School of Approach. The last slide I will show you on this general topic is critical versus analytical. So I want to explain to you a difference between these two terms, because there's a lot of buzz in academia that you should have critical thinking. Now, critical thinking in itself is a good thing. But you have to be very careful, because when the secular educational system uses the term critical thinking, for some of them, the underlying message is you should be willing to critique Allah Ta'ala's book, Qur'an. You should be willing to critique Sayyidina Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Sunnah. So the more proper term I prefer to use is analytical thinking, which is also, if you Google it, analytical thought and analytical thinking. In fact, there's a whole area of philosophy called analytic philosophy. Some people call it analytic theology. And this actually has been used very much in the divinity school approach in America by Christians who want to retain their core principles of faith and belief while embarking on an academic study which has the historical, intellectual, and spiritual approaches to understanding their religion. So always remember that it doesn't mean if you ever hear any Islamic lecturer or alim counseling you not to adopt critical thinking, what they're not saying is, they're not saying don't use your mind. What they're saying is don't think that you can critique Allah Ta'ala in Qur'an, or you can't critique the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in his Sunnah. Any Islamic scholar, he's human. He's subject to critique. He's subject to review. He's subject to refutation. He's subject to agreement, partial agreement, full agreement. That's an insan. But as far as Allah Ta'ala, Qur'an, Sayyidina Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Sunnah go, the word we're going to use is analytical. So we want to analyze. We want to understand. We want to explore. We want to ponder. We want to reflect. All right? So now I think with these few terms you've understood the basic methodology that we are going to be following in these sessions. Now the morning topic is Introduction to Theology and Ethics. Now theology, if you can show all of it actually. Theology, in Arabic there are two words that you will find, aqidah and kalam. Aqidah and kalam. Now strictly speaking, aqidah is normally translated as creed or your creedal statement. For example, within Sunnis, the most universally agreed upon a creedal statement is a text written by Imam Abu Ja'far at-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, known as Aqidah Tahawiyya. And this Aqidah Tahawiyya is agreed upon by all the Sunnis, and even in terms if you want to talk about contemporary Pakistani Indian Sunni divisions known as Deobandi, Barelvi, Ahl Hadith, all three agree on this Aqidah. The Saudis agree on it, the Pakistanis agree on it, the Indonesians agree on it, and has been translated, by the way, in English. by a very well-known, respected American convert scholar to Islam by the name of Hamza Yusuf, and has been published in America, and Allahu Alam if it's available yet in this country. Aqidah, creedal statement, what does it mean? So the creedal statement embodies your basic set of beliefs about Allah Ta'ala, prophethood and prophecy and Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, angels, scriptures, life after death, resurrection, etc., etc. And they're very short statements. Another very well-known Aqidah has been written by Imam al-Ghazali Rahimahullah Ta'ala, and some say he wrote it when he was Quds, yani in Jerusalem, Quds Sharif, and it is sometimes known as Al-Risala al-Qudsiyya. That's also been translated in English and is also, in fact, both of these are available on the internet, Aqidat Tahawiyya in English and the Risala Qudsiyya. I'm not going to be talking to you about Aqidah and all in this course. Kalam. Kalam is a different field. Kalam, in fancy English, they translate this as dialectic or sometimes dialectical theology. Kalam was that analytical approach trying to understand matters of faith. This is what Ilmul Kalam. Ilmul Kalam was all about this. Going deep into different things that Allah Ta'ala has mentioned to us. For example, what is Iman? For example, what does it mean that Allah Ta'ala has a Zat, has an essence, and He also has Sifat, He has attributes? And you'd be amazed at how deep some of the ulama explored some questions. Free will and predestination, a lot of the questions that many university-educated people ask, that do I have free will? If Allah Ta'ala knows everything, if Allah Ta'ala decrees everything, you will find long, lengthy discussions on this topic. Why did Allah Ta'ala create evil? Why did Allah Ta'ala create shaitan? You will find long, lengthy discussions on this topic. Why will Allah Ta'ala punish somebody eternally in hellfire? Why not just punish them for 80 years? Why does Allah Ta'ala need to punish people? I have in my own personal one life have never yet encountered a single question raised by any philosopher or any atheist, except that when I went back and did the research, I found that the ulama of Kalam, ulama of Ilmul Kalam, had already discussed and analyzed the same question at length, but using their understanding of Qur'an and Sunnah, not merely on the basis of their intellect and rationality. All of these discussions are there in Ilmul Kalam, right? Now, some of them we will be talking about in a future session, which is called the Science, Rationality, and the New Atheism. I'm going to do a couple of them for you today, so you get an idea of how this system works. Every lecture I'm basically giving you is just a drop in a very, very vast ocean. Is a drop in a very, very vast ocean, right? We could do a whole course on Islamic theology. One could design a whole degree program on Islamic theology. And there are such degrees in the world. The point in this series of lectures in these 5 days is to give you a glimpse, what sometimes I call a behind-the-scenes tour. Now, what happens when you go on a behind-the-scenes tour of a factory? You will not learn enough to build your own factory. You will not learn enough to understand every element of the factory, but somebody will grab you by the hand and show you the major things in the factory, and at the end they will take you right back by the exit door and send you on your way, right? And if ever you decide that you want to also build a factory or really understand a factory, for that you will have to embark on a much longer course of study. But what we're going to do now is take you on a behind-the-scenes tour of this world of Ilmul Kalam using a couple of topics as an introduction. The first thing, and I think the font sizes are very small, the next thing is a Hadith of Gabriel. This is a very famous hadith, and this has been narrated both by Imam Bukhari Rahimahullah Ta'ala and Imam Muslim Rahimahullah Ta'ala in their Sahih collections. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this to you today is classically, in the classical study of Islam, the study of Islam used to traditionally begin with this hadith. And this hadith was used to frame a discussion. Now I'll just read this hadith out for you in English very quickly. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is the narrator of this hadith. And he says that one day we were, a whole group of Sahaba Ikram, were sitting with Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then all of a sudden, a man appeared. What he means by that is somebody that we didn't know, right? And his clothes were extremely white, and his hair was extremely black. His clothes were extremely white, and his hair was very black. And no traces, alamat safar, no signs of the journey were apparent upon him. No signs of the journey were apparent on him, and none of us knew him. What does he mean? That none of us knew him means he's not from Medina Munawwara. He must have come from somewhere else. But if you came from somewhere else, when you make the desert journey, your white clothes would become dusty, and your black beard would become dusty. Like, mashallah, all of you in Pakistan like to buy white cars. I never understood. Once I asked a boy, so he said the dark colored car shows the dirt more. I said, no, the white would show the dirt more. He said, no, the dark color shows the dirt more. And he was right, it turns out. Allahu Akbar. Right? So that's what they mean here. So meri baat bhi yahan, give baat bhi yahan, that the clothes were white and the beard was still black. And his hair was still black. All right. So, and then he came straight. He sat down close by the Prophet ﷺ, means he cut through all of our ranks and he went straight to Nabi Kareem ﷺ and he sat by him. And then what did he do? He rested his knees upon his thighs, which is a very intimate way of touching. Touching with physical contact. An intimate way of touching that normally a stranger would not adopt. And immediately he asked a question. No salam, no introduction, no how are you, no who am I. Immediately asked a question that informed me, tell me, what is Islam? Right? And now, what is Islam? So the Prophet ﷺ said, so this is the famous hadith that you all know, that is the quote-unquote 5 pillars are mentioned here as well. Islam is that you should bear shahada, testify that there is no God except for Allah Ta'ala, and that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is last and final messenger. Second, that you should perform salah. Third, that you should pay zakah. Fourth, that you should fast in the month of Ramadan. And the fifth, that you should perform hajj to Baytullah if you're able to do so. The man said to him that you have spoken truly. So Sayyidina Umar says that we were stunned at the way this person was asking the Prophet ﷺ, and this person did tasdeeq. Because normally a person higher in knowledge will tell you, you spoke truly. No Sahabi could think that anybody would talk to Nabi Kareem ﷺ like that. Then he asked a second question. The second question was, tell me, what is Iman? So the Prophet ﷺ responded that it is that you believe in Allah Ta'ala and all the angels and all the revealed books and scriptures and all of the sent messengers and prophets, and in the last day means the day of judgment, and in qadr, khayrihi wa sharrihi, that you believe in the divine decreed fate and decision, both that which is good in it and that which is evil in it. So the Prophet responded, and like I told you, Aqidah, the creedal statements, they begin with this sentence and they just open it up and they write a commentary on these 6-7 points. So that person said, you've spoken truly. Then again he asked the Prophet ﷺ, tell me, what is ihsan? What is ihsan? The Prophet ﷺ responded that it is to worship Allah Ta'ala as if you see Him. أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ. Worship Allah Ta'ala as if you were seeing Him. And if you can't do that, then at least worship Allah Ta'ala in such a way that you know that He is gazing upon you. Again the person said, you've spoken truly. Then he said, fourth question, that tell me about the hour. Means the end of time. Tell me about the hour, the end of time. The Prophet ﷺ responded that about that, the one questioned about himself knows no more than the questioner. One being questioned knows no more than the questioner. Then he said, okay, then let me know about its signs. So the Prophet ﷺ responded that amongst its signs, there's a few mentions in the hadith, that you will see the slave girl will give birth to her mistress. You will see the barefoot, naked, destitute, means extremely poor, shepherds competing, vying with one another to erect and construct tall, lofty buildings. Then the man went away. That's it. So Sayyidina Umar says that I waited a while. I stayed back and waited. And then Rasulullah, he turned to me and said, Ya Umar, oh Umar radiallahu anhu, do you know who that person was who asked these questions? Sayyidina Umar responded, and look at the adab also, Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger know best. Means he didn't guess. Or in student's term, he didn't try to score some CP points and try to guess, right? He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam know best. So Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was Jibreel. He came to teach you your deen. He came to teach you your deen. Now this hadith, now I'm going to open this up for you, how this is the beginning of the study of deen. Number one, it begins with the last line, that because the Prophet ﷺ said that this is a very elementary beginning introduction to what is deen. It means deen means Iman plus Islam plus ihsan, plus knowing that there is something coming, which is called the hour, the end of time, the end of the world, and knowing that there are signs that will reveal the coming of that end of time. This is called deen. This is called deen. So that notion that there's an end of time coming, that's a vision of the future. One is historical past. One is a vision of the future. And second, that there are going to be signs that indicate a decline that will lead to that end. That's an understanding of society. In modern terms, we will call that sociology. That's an understanding of social reality. And also implying that for deen, you have to be aware of social reality. Because why are signs given? Signs are given for you to get ready, for you to be prepared, for you to know in advance. But if you don't have your pulse on society, if you don't know social reality, you won't be able to perceive those signs. So you won't be able to take heed. You won't be able to take the warning and advice that Allah wants us to by telling us about those signs. So it means that part of deen means knowing that there's a future which has an end of the world, and that future is going to be marked by spiritual decline, and that a person must be aware and tracking the spiritual decline in society. That's part of deen. So therefore you understand why I mentioned this notion of historical approach. And another part of deen is to understand these three things: Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. So now if you look at the next slide, we put it up for you there. Okay, keep it there. Then what is deen, Iman, Islam, Ihsan, and I'm just calling it social reality. Now if you go back to the hadith, the Sahaba Ikram were so amazed, like I explained to you, that number one, this is a person we don't know, there are no signs of a journey upon him. He spoke so intimately with the Prophet ﷺ. He did tasdeeq, he said, you spoke truly. Then when he asked the Prophet ﷺ about the hour, he said, the one being questioned knows no more than the questioner. So it means Nabi Karim ﷺ equated the questioner with him, that I don't know any more than you. Sahaba were stunned. That imagine, because they don't know yet it's Angel Gabriel. So imagine the feeling of the Sahaba, they must have been stunned, that who is this person? That Sayyidina Rasulullah is telling him that I don't know any more than you do. Because obviously even for us, the Nabi knows the most. And for the Sahaba, their living teacher is telling this person that I am as good as you in this. I don't know any more than you do. Right? So obviously Sayyidina Umar, because he was one of the Khulafai Rashidun, the more senior wise Sahaba, he was shaken up. He stayed back. He's like, I can't move, I'm mesmerized by what I just witnessed. And then Nabi Karim must have saw that in him, and then out of his grace, the Prophet then explained to him that, oh, this was actually Angel Gabriel who came in human form, and he came to teach you your deen. He came to teach you your deen. Now this is not actually here right now in your presentation, but I'm just going to explain to you. There were some disciplines that emerged, disciplines of Islamic learning, that emerged from these three things. First, the discipline that emerged, what is the study of Iman? That was this study of Aqidah and Kalam. That was a whole discipline of learning, a whole series of scholars, again, across time, writing in historical contexts, but also trying to capture universal meanings and truths. A whole series of scholarship, books, treatises, discussions, debates, disagreements, consensuses taken on this question of Iman. This is known as Ilmul Kalam, or Ilmul Aqa'id. Second, on this notion of Islam. So in Islam, Sayyidina Rasulullah mentioned some of our obligations: prayer, fasting, zakat, hajj, right? So a whole world of scholarship developed around the study and understanding of this, and that is known as Ilmul Fiqh, and that's going to be coming a few days later. Ilmul Fiqh means to understand the commands and wishes of Allah Ta'ala from the sources of deen, and from the Qur'an and Sunnah. To derive an understanding from the textual sources of Islam, that is called ilmul fiqh. So for example, here in this hadith, okay, we understand we have to fast. But what is fasting? How long do you fast? What breaks the fast? That's not mentioned in this hadith. It's mentioned that you have to pray. But how do you pray? How many rakats are the prayer? What if you leave it out, it invalidates your prayer? What are those things that if you forget it, you can make it up with 2 extra sajdas? That's not mentioned in this hadith, right? So a whole world was developed called ilmul fiqh, whole area of study. Third was what is ihsan. Ihsan. So a whole world was developed on this. Okay, we've been given a target: worship Allah Ta'ala as if you see Him. But what does that mean? First of all, what does it mean even? What does that mean? How do you worship Allah Ta'ala as if you're seeing Him? Because obviously your akal will tell you, see, these are the things that are beyond the realm of rationality. Your rational mind will tell you, I can't see Allah Ta'ala. Prophet ﷺ is telling you, worship as if you see Allah Ta'ala. Obviously there has to be something beyond rationality, some way of learning, some understanding. So this was the realm of the spiritual approaches, right? Spiritual approaches. This is known as ilmu tazkiyah, the knowledge of spiritual purification. Later on, some people, they gave it the name tasawwuf, but its real, original, classical name is ilmu tazkiyah. How to create these feelings in yourself. And if you can't do that, know that Allah Ta'ala is looking at you, get that feeling, right? Now, many people, when they narrate this hadith, they say prayer is an anta'budallah. Make ibadah, all ibadah. It's not just about salah, it's not just about the daily prayer. All ibadah should be done. You're reciting Qur'an, recite it in a way that you know, that you feel as if you're seeing Allah Ta'ala. You're reciting salawat, durud sharif, do it in a way that you're seeing Allah Ta'ala. Then if you take an even broader sense of ibadah, you're doing any relief work, humanitarian work, khidmat for society, you're spending time with your family, any and every aspect of your life, if you make the right intention, it can be construed as ibadah to Allah Ta'ala. So that means do all of that with the feeling in your heart as if I'm seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does a person do that? How does a person transform their whole life such that this feeling is always there? So obviously we needed some understanding of that. This has to be opened up. We need tafsil. We need this to be opened up, and we need to learn it and be trained in it in order to acquire this. And why? Because the last thing is what? That on the top, the header is what? That this is your deen. This is your deen. This is why it's a great mistake when people say that Islam just means to do these 5 things. No, look at the hadith about deen. Islam also means that you have to have this Iman. Islam also means that you have to worship Allah Ta'ala with such feelings. That's also deen. And Islam also means that you have to have this awareness of social reality and the notion that humanity is going on decline. Now if I go back, I want to show you a couple of things. I want to go back to the Hadith of Gabriel and I'm going to show you a way that Hadith is analyzed, an analytical study. I'm going to take you through that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this very last thing, which were the signs. So what was the first sign of the hour? Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress. Now what exactly does that mean? So I'm going to open it up. Any one of you, you're going to raise your hand. Don't just blurt it out. But if you have, what does that mean? Now understand this, let me explain. We have to understand this. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us that one of the signs of the end of time is that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress. Now there's some things in Islam just by the linguistic meaning, surface meaning, we can understand it completely. Like, okay, make hajj if you're able. Understood. What does this mean? Slave girl gives birth to a mistress. I need to understand that in order to be keeping my pulse on society to see when that happens, so I know that the time of the end is near. What does it mean that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress?
Mother would be disrespected by her mother.
Okay. So one meaning is that a mother will be disrespected by her own daughter. So what did this fine fellow just do? What this fine fellow just did is he took a non-literal interpretation. So when you're going into an analytical study of Islam, the question is that will you only take the text literally, or are you willing to open it up that maybe the literal meaning is not only what's intended, maybe the literal meaning is a metaphor. So in terms, when I used to teach people, I used to call this the knob. How far will you turn the knob? So if you keep the knob at 0, literal meaning means just this. So what would mean that there must be some girl who is a slave, and she will grow up and she will have a daughter. And when she has a daughter, somehow that daughter will become free. Somehow that daughter will become free. And when that daughter becomes free, she will choose to buy her mother as a slave, and she will enslave her own mother. That would be the literal meaning. So if you set the knob at 0, so the knob is basically the interpretive scope that you want to apply on any verse of Quran or any text of Hadith. If you set the knob at 0, means no interpretation. There's no metaphor here. There's no deeper meaning here. There's no general meaning. I will keep it at its literal meaning. That would be the literal meaning, right? Now that's quite difficult to imagine, right? It's almost impossible, right? That somebody would become free and then enslave her own mother. But strictly speaking, because now we bring the faith-based element, our faith in the Prophet ﷺ demands us to think, well, no, but that might very well happen. Allah knows best. I may not be able to see how that will happen, but there may come a time in the world when this will happen. And when that literally happens, I will understand that that's a sign of the hour. Second option is now to turn the knob a little bit. So when we turn the knob a little bit like our fine friend did here, so let's say I turn it to 1. It means, okay, let me open up the meaning a little bit. Maybe Sayyidina Rasulullah is telling me some words, but there's a deeper meaning. I have to read into that language. So what the Prophet ﷺ is telling me is actually an upheaval. Yeah, I'm not there yet. Just keep it on Hadith of Gabriel. An upheaval of the family order, right? Because when we took the look over here, understand. When we took the literal meaning, we got a message from that. That this would be a horrible thing to do. That a daughter becomes free, and she should rejoice, but instead of rejoicing, she enslaves her own mother. This would be a horrible thing to do, right? So then if we took out the lesson of the horrible thing, it's exactly this, that the daughter wouldn't respect the mother, right? The daughter would become extremely disrespectful to the mother. So when we turn it to the knob to 1, this is what we get. We may even then retake the literal meaning that she will be so disrespectful to her mother, she will view herself as the mother, and she will make herself, mistress means master, female master of her mom. She will treat her mom like she's the daughter. All right, now watch this. You can turn the knob to notch 2. Now we turn the knob further, you can get a wider meaning. That actually, it literally does mean the slave girl. You can never negate the literal meaning, right? Well, that's actually a tricky statement I just said. Maybe I should never say the word never. They say in English, never say never. Allahu Akbar. But it's very rare, and that will come a little bit later, maybe sometime in the course, that you can abandon the literal statement. But in this case, you could keep the literal one. That might literally happen. Second, it may happen like that it just means that daughters will disrespect their mothers. Third, if I turn the knob further, it's just generally referring to social upheaval, to social disorder, to social chaos. That an overturning, a flip-flop of the natural social order of things. So for example, if I was sitting in 2016, I could say, okay, well in some Western countries, they believe in same-sex marriage. Otherwise, classically, always, even in the vast majority of Western history, and still many people in the West, they don't agree with this. They view marriage as something between a man and a woman. So if I take it to knob 3, I turn the knob all the way to position 3, and take this wider meaning, so this is called in Arabic, umum al-ma'na, ta'mim fil ma'na, to create a broader understanding in the meaning, from the loves, from the articulated text. So I would say it just reverses social upheaval, an upturning, a reversal of roles in society. So then I would say, well, this is a role reversal. Role is supposed to be man and woman get married. And now they're saying man and man can get married and woman can get married. Now what happens is, depending on where you turn the knob, it will determine whether the sign has occurred or not. So if I turn the knob all the way to point 3, and I say, well look, same-sex marriage is happening in the world, this is a sign that the end of judgment is coming near. A person who says, no, I keep the knob on 0, there's no slave girl yet who's given birth to her mistress, the sign hasn't happened yet. So you see it has implications. It has implications. So on the one hand, you open it up, right? So like in a classroom setting, right? We're not making any decisions of belief here. We're just exploring possibilities. When we open up and explore, you can see a wide range of meaning. So the term I use, and I'm going to keep saying this in the course, this is called turn the knob. How far will you turn the knob? Then there's another question, who's allowed to touch the knob? Who can turn the knob? This is another thing, right? This is another thing, obviously, right? If anyone and everyone can touch that knob, there's going to be a problem. Even to maintain sound control over here, we have designated people who are going to be doing the sound and presentation. If anyone and everyone jumped in, so they say in English, too many cooks spoiled the broth. So same thing will happen. Too many dialers of the knob will spoil the interpretation. It can't be completely arbitrary. It can't be completely random. But at the same time, how do you regulate it? What are the guidelines? What are the limits? What are the limitations? I'm not going to give you the answers to these questions. I'm showing you these are all the things that come up when you want to have an analytical understanding of your deen. So the first concept is the knob. First concept is the knob. Let's look at the second point here just so you get an understanding. So the second sign the Prophet ﷺ said was what? That the barefoot, naked, destitute shepherds will compete with one another in constructing and erecting tall buildings. Now here, I think if you keep the knob at 0, you actually can see that in the world. If you ever travel to Saudi Arabia or any of the GCC countries for that matter, now they're not literally naked. They're not literally barefoot. So it depends. If you keep the knob at 0, they have to literally be naked and literally be barefoot. But if you take it that what the Prophet ﷺ was saying was a kinaya, was to indicate that they're extremely poor and they're being used to construct skyscrapers that you can find in the GCC. Dubai, Qatar, Jeddah, Riyadh, all of it. Even Makkah Mukarramah, Allahu Akbar. Can you imagine that if this is the interpretation and if this is a sign, for that sign to take place within Hudud-e-Haram itself? But you will find Bangladeshis and Pakistanis and Egyptians and even some now Indonesians also, very poor people. This is called migrant labor, and being given very low wages and living about 10 of them to a room to save money so they can send maximum remittances home. And what are they doing? They're constructing extremely tall buildings. And you have this constant thing. Somebody told me recently that Dubai had the highest one, and now Saudi saying we're going to make the highest one. So this notion of competition. So other than the naked barefoot part, you can pretty much keep the knob at 0, and the literal meaning is there. If you want to turn the knob a little bit, turn the knob a little bit and take a more general meaning from this. So it might mean that, or let's turn the knob all the way. Well, let's turn it like to dial number 3. So that would just mean materialism. This is capitalism, materialism, competition, right? This notion of free competition in order to pursue materialistic ends. That can also be coming from this hadith, right? So basically, it's about the knob. So one interpretive tool is the knob. This is what I want to show you from this hadith. You understand? So one aspect was that there are certain things that haven't been explained. Fine, I have to worship Allah Ta'ala feeling that I see Him. But how do I do that? You need some analytical there. That's not about the knob. I'm going to show you that later. You have to open it up. You have to go deep into it. Here, you may turn the knob. All right? Okay. So this is the first aspect. I'm going to basically giving you 2-3 things where I give you a glimpse of this concept of theology. So the first was this hadith to give you a bit of a feel for how hadith were studied and understood and analyzed. Right now, if we move over here to the next slide, that what is Iman? That is done. And the next slide is what is Iman? All right. Now just pause over there. No, keep that slide up there. Right. What is Iman? Now you might think that, why do I need to ask this question? You just showed me the hadith that Angel Gabriel asked the Prophet this question, what is Iman? It's already done. It was on an earlier slide. And the Prophet responded that Iman is to believe in Allah Ta'ala, angels, books, prophets, day of judgment, and the decree, all that is good in it and bad in it comes from Allah. But the reality is now that to understand anything, for example, what is Iman, you have to do a second thing, which I'm going to show you. So the first concept was the knob. The second concept is the workshop. Now what do you have to do if you really want to understand, take a deep analytical understanding of your deen? You have to go into Qur'an, and every single verse in Qur'an that has the word Iman, Mu'min, Alladhina Amanu, Mu'mineen, you have to bring it all on the table. You have to build a workshop. You have to build a workshop, even if you want to answer this one question, what is Iman? You have to build a workshop. You have to put all the verses on the table. Then you have to go to the hadith, and all the things, like I showed you one of them, all the things that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us about Iman, has described Iman, has defined Iman. You have to bring all of those hadith to the workshop. So it's not easy. Don't think analytical approach to deen means you just use your mind and you start guessing what Iman is. No. In any knowledge academic endeavor, there's certain sources, there's certain literature, there's certain fundamental truths that you have to engage those truths. So with the Islamic system, those fundamental truths are the Qur'an and the Sunnah. I cannot think on my own what is Iman. I have to ask that question from the Qur'an, and I have to ask that question from the Sunnah. And the answer I will get, and I'm going to show you that, the answers sometimes you will get to even such a central, crucial question as this, as what is Iman, the answer you will get is multiple. It's multi-layered. It's sometimes apparently might even seem to have some apparent contradiction in it. When you put all of the verses and all of the hadith, then if you want to take the historical approach as well, right? So this will be intellectual approach. Intellectual approach would be, I take all the verses and hadith. Now let's bring in the historical approach. Historical approach would add what? That how have all of these verses on Iman been understood historically by the tafsir tradition? So then I would have to add to the workshop what? Every single mufassir's commentary on every single verse on Iman. Now obviously that is not necessarily binding upon me, but it's something I should look at. It's something I should look at. If I want to take the historical approach, that across history, how have these verses been understood? Similarly, every hadith that mentions the word Iman, every hadith scholar, muhaddith's commentary and understanding and explanation, tashri'ah and shara of that hadith, I have to put all of that on the table. So now I'm really I'm sweating now. I'm building a huge workshop, right? Then when I build this huge workshop, then I've got to dive in and read all that stuff and try to figure out a basic crucial question of life. What is Iman? What is Iman? All right? There's another aspect to the intellectual approach, by the way, which is linguistics. That's another thing. I can go deep into Arabic language and linguistics. I can do what is called an etymological. I can look at the roots of Iman. Hamza, Mim, Noon. And those of you who were with us on a recent session, I explained this, that Iman is related to Aman. Can the Arabic language itself tell me something about what is Iman? Yes, it can. So I have to bring language in. One thing I should read, Iman means Aman, because Iman and Aman are derived from the same root, and all the words that are derived from the same root have an interrelationship, a nisbah, what we call in Arabic, ilaqat tashbih. They have some relation and interrelation with each other. So that's also something I'll bring to the table. That's also something I'll bring to the table. Now I want to show you to spiritual. Intellectual is done, spiritual. Spiritual would mean I have to see that those people, now spiritual means the living embodiment of deen. Those individuals in the ummah who had this iman, because obviously deen is not just about theory, right? Deen necessarily must also have a practical, real, lived example and legacy and a living tradition. So those people who were really mu'mineen, who were salihin mu'mineen, muttaqeen mu'mineen, dhakireen mu'mineen, sadiqeen mu'mineen, awliya mu'mineen, all of these words are in Qur'an. What was their spiritual state? What was their condition? Did they ever describe this feeling of iman? What does it feel to have iman in a heart? What are those things that can increase the feelings and strength of iman in a person's heart? What are those things that can decrease the feeling and strength of iman in a person's heart? So that the living tradition will tell me. Living tradition will tell me, right? Sometimes they may have expressed their iman in poetry. Sometimes they may have expressed their feelings of iman in prose. Sometimes they may have written treaties or letters explaining what makes a person's iman strong, what makes a person's iman weak. I have to add all of that, the spiritual tradition, the lived tradition, the living legacy, the practical aspects of iman. All of that has to come in the workshop. All of this has to be done if you truly want to take that analytical understanding of your deen. Historical, intellectual, spiritual, the text, the context, the interpretive tradition, the linguistic aspect, the lived aspect, the feelings aspect, all of that, even just to ask this question, what is Iman? What is Iman? So now I want to show you some of this. Right. Do I have it here also? If you email it to me, I can open it up. All right? Now what you're going to find is that, in fact, I will go ahead and show you the answer first. It will be a bit easier. So if you can go ahead and show them this slide, which is the positions of Iman. So what I'm going to tell you is, after this Islamic scholarly tradition built the workshop, right? And they looked at all those things I just told you, they came up with 4 answers. They came up with 4 answers to this question, what is Iman? So you will find multiplicity of meaning, and go back. Building the workshop is also done. positions on Iman. Show all 4. Positions on Iman. Number 1, that Iman is a feeling that lies in the heart only. Simply feeling the feelings of Iman. I'm going to open it up for you when I show you the verses in Hadith. It's just a matter of the heart. Second position was tongue. That no, if somebody expresses Iman with their tongue, so they simply say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. They just have to say that sentence with their tongue, that equals Iman. Third position was that they have to do both. They must truly believe it in their heart, and they must also express it in their tongue. Fourth position was that Iman means that you must believe in your heart, you must express with your tongue, and you must do a'mal. You must perform the actions of Iman. That the way they explain this is that al-a'malu dakhil, that actions are part and parcel of Iman. They're not something separate. One could be separate, that Iman is something, amal is something else. They said no. Amal is part of Iman along with the heart and tongue. Now before I go back and build part of the workshop for you, again, this to show you the whole workshop requires, I'll tell you that when I used to be a full-time student of Sahih Bukhari, and we used to, Sahih Bukhari's chapter of Iman is maybe a dozen pages. And we had to spend a few hours every day for a couple of months. A few hours every day, 6 days a week for a couple of months just to do Kitab al-Iman, just to understand that one part of the workshop is those hadith that Imam Bukhari narrated on the subject of Iman. There are many, many other hadith and there are many, many verses and linguistics and all of that. So the workshop is massive. I can't show you all of that. But I fast forwarded to show you the conclusions. There's no fifth conclusion that came out. In the entire history of Islam, there were 4 things that came out. Now, why is this important? So this is important because sometimes you might get a question. So I'll give you a very classic example that happens many times in this community. So you have a Pakistani boy who goes abroad to study in America or the UK, and he comes back and he says, I want to marry this girl, right? No, it turns out that the girl was born into an atheist family, and the girl was an atheist, right? Okay, now the parents come running to me. Huh? Oh, हमारा बेटा किसी से शादी करना चाहता है, huh? I say, आपने खुद उसको बाहर भेजा, right? You sent him abroad, you put him in a university, which was an open-minded decision that you took, and he had lived in an open society, in an open environment, and an open interaction with the opposite gender. So when you created so much openness, these things can happen. These things can happen. So he said, no, but we've explained to him that the girl, she must accept Islam. And the girl has agreed. But what does it mean to accept Islam? What does it mean to adopt Iman? So for some people, it's just about saying the sentence. So what does she mean is that she's, look, I really want to marry you, and you want to marry me, and if all I have to do is say the sentence in front of a few people, I'll say the sentence. I'll say the sentence, and we'll get married. And sometimes the parents also are happy with that. They say, son, as long as she's willing to say the sentence, and then they'll try to euphemize it in a nice way, oh, only Allah knows what's in the heart. That's true. Only Allah Ta'ala knows what's in a person's heart, but many times a person reveals their heart. You see, if somebody comes and says, I'm an atheist, I can't say Allah Ta'ala knows if there's Iman in his heart or not. I can't say that. Obviously Allah Ta'ala knows, but I also know now, because He has said there's no Iman in his heart. It doesn't mean human beings can't know anything. We can know things. But we know things, we have to receive it through some authentic source. Somebody else tells me something about someone, that's not an authentic source. But the person himself tells me that I don't have Iman in my heart. That's an authentic source of information. I can view that as a source of knowledge. I am entitled in my deen to say, I know this person does not have Iman. Source, because he himself told me that he doesn't have Iman. Right? Without that source, yes, only Allah Ta'ala knows what's in the heart. So what happens now? The girl says that I'm an atheist still, but I'm willing to recite this sentence. And sometimes the boy's parent will say, okay, fine, it's fine, just as long as she recites the sentence. Now, it depends what position you take. If you took the second position, that Iman is just reciting the sentence with your tongue, well, then they're good to go and you can get them married. You can read their nikah. But if you take any other position on the board, right, because all the other 3 have heart, right, that she truly has to believe in her heart, and she's saying, I don't do that, then you would say, okay, well, this nikah is not valid. I can't read the nikah. So now that goes back to what I told you, the social reality aspect. That your understanding of deen affects issues of social reality, right? There's so many issues like this, right? Who's going to have to pay zakat? The person who just says it with their tongue, the person who believes in their heart. There are some things like marriage and such things where we actually do need to identify this question as to who has Iman or not. There are certain societal, family, collective, interpersonal aspects of Islam that require this question to be defined. Now, what you just saw right now also is that when you're talking about definitions, so a definition means, by definition, to create a border. That's why the Arabic word for definition is had. Had means hudud, borders, that you're defining something. And in formal scientific definition, which is called taxonomy, you try to define something so precisely, so specifically, that it includes all elements of that set and it excludes all elements that are not part of that set. So you have to define it so precisely. So it means that Iman has to be defined so precisely that everyone who has Iman should be included in that definition, and also people who don't have Iman should be excluded from that definition. And that is also a word that all of you know that has come in Qur'an that's called kufr. And there's a word kafir and kuffar. It means people who don't have Iman. It means people that's also a concept in Qur'an, right? But right now I think people are still not learned enough to handle the topic of what is kufr in a sensitive, academic, non-violent, non-extremist manner. So right now, then I chose rather to do for you what is Iman, but I gave you this much of a hint. However you answer that question, what is Iman, that will also necessarily give you the answer to your question to what is not Iman, right? When you have decided what is Iman, you will, as a logical necessity, end up also deciding what is not Iman. So khair, so these four positions came up. Now I'm going to go back and show you some of the verses in Hadith that caused these four positions to emerge, right? And if we go back, if you mention, I also had put this thing up on multiplicity of meaning. You keep it on this, but I'll just explain verbally. So this is something very quickly you will encounter, and I wanted to show it to you up front the very first day, first session. You will find multiplicity of meaning. And this itself disturbs some people. They don't understand. A nice, ordinary, well-intentioned Muslim says, well, how come Iman? How can people disagree on that? Iman is such a fundamental thing. How is it possible that there are multiple understandings and multiple positions on what is Iman? And then some people get worried that everything is disagreed and there's disagreement on everything. So I'm going to be building that up for you. But in order to understand why there's disagreement, you need to, like I said, go behind the scenes and appreciate how that disagreement came about. That disagreement, yes, there are some disagreements that come due to ideology, sectarianism, extremism. But the point to show you is that there's some disagreements, means diverse, multiple, divergent understandings that come only purely from this academic, analytical study of Islam. When you take into account the historical, intellectual, and spiritual approach, and you build the whole workshop, and you start turning the knob, you're going to get multiple meanings. Yes, without the workshop, without touching the knob, without using all three, historical, spiritual, and intellectual, you can end up with just one meaning. But when you start doing all of these things that I showed you up till now, you will start getting multiple meanings on very many things. And this is how you get multiple meanings on this issue of what is Iman. So we're going to show you these. I just have to open up these slides on my laptop also, so I can, without turning my head, look at this for you. All right. All right, so the first verse you have here is Surah Baqarah, if I'm not mistaken, Surah Baqarah verse 286. Is that what you have in front of you? Yes? Hmm? Yes. Okay. All right. Now, what do you have here? Here in this verse, and this is a very well-known verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون. That Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam believes in each and every single thing revealed to him by his Rabb, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ, and all of the believers also believe in each and everything revealed by Allah Rabbul Izzat to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So immediately here you get another concept, which I couldn't put everything on the PowerPoint for you. Normally we use Blackboard, but because of the women, it's very difficult for me to start writing things on the board for the people to see. So there's another concept of Iman. So how can I'm going to give this to you as an example. All right. How many of you have Iman that I have a watch in my hand? Raise your hand. How many of you have Iman that I have a watch in my hand? Raise your hand quickly. Okay, this is wrong. Wrong. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. The Iman means to believe in the unseen. You could see this. You can see. Those of you who can see in front of me, that I have a watch in my hand. That's not Iman. That's called mushahada in Arabic. Mushahada. You have eyewitness testimony. You have eyewitness that I have a watch in my hand. Iman is bil ghaib. Iman means to believe in the unseen. So let's try this again. How many of you have Iman that I have a pen in my pocket? Of the faithful are few and far between in this world. Right? Yeah. Those who trust. Right? Yeah. Allahu Akbar. Oh. Subhanallah. Huh? So that was unseen. That was unseen. Now why would you believe I have a pen in my pocket? If I told you I had a pen in my pocket, you would have Iman based on if you think I'm a true person. Based on I'm a true person. So what did Allah Ta'ala say here? Aman al-Rasulu, that Sayyidina Rasulullah believes. Bima, in each and every single thing. This is the translation of ma. In each and every single thing, unzila ilayhi min rabbihi, that has been revealed to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from his Rabb. Wal mu'minun, and the believers also believe in all of that. Now we are not privy to that. That's unseen. For Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah Ta'ala revealed it to him. And we still don't know everything, because obviously what Allah Ta'ala revealed to him is Qur'an. He recited it to us, that's Qur'an. What Allah Ta'ala revealed to him is Hadith and Sunnah to share with the people. He recited that to us. But there may be some things Allah Ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that mean you don't know. There may be some things he saw at Miraj that mean you don't know. But we believe in all of that also. We believe in every single thing that Allah Ta'ala revealed to him as he believed in it. But for us it's ghaib. For us it's ghaib. So you remember earlier in Quran, right in the start of Baqarah, Alladina yu'minuna bil ghaib. So now you're building up, right? Because I said I couldn't show you every single. To give you a PowerPoint with all the verses on Iman and all the Hadith would take us all the 5 days. So I'm showing elements of the workshop. So we're building our definition. Iman means to believe in the unseen. Iman means to believe in whatever Allah Ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Iman means to believe in it with as certainty as the same certainty that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam believed in it. Then I told you language. So when we take Iman, let's say a person wants to accept Iman, what do we say? You have to take Shahada. Shahada. What does it mean? So Shahada was from Mushahada, eyewitness. It means you have to believe in the unseen as if it was seen. You have to believe in the ghaib with so much yaqeen as if it was Mushahada. That's why it's called taking Shahada Tashahud. Allahu Akbar Kabira. So language is teaching us. It is to believe in the unseen, but to believe in the unseen as if it was seen. So this is the answer to certain secular atheist concepts of empiricism, that we only believe in those things that can be empirically be demonstrated. So no, we believe in the ghaib. We believe in the ghaib as much as we believe in all empirical, mathematical, scientific realities. Here, but that topic is coming on its own time. All right. Then there were some elements here, some elements of that Iman. So what was that? Kullun. So each and every one of the Prophets and all the believers, Amana Billahi, they believe in Allah Ta'ala and the angels and the scriptures and the messengers. But what's missing here, so to speak, what was there in the Hadith that's not here in the ayah? Wal qadri khayrihi wa sharrihi. So what does it mean? So it means that there's no single one text that can give you that definition of Iman. So I'm showing you why you need the workshop. You're going to find some elements in this verse, some in another verse, some in another hadith. You have to build the entire workshop. Okay, and then says another thing, that we believe in all the messengers equally. Because our Iman in Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is equal to our Iman. Our Iman in the Nabuwa of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is equal to our Iman in the Nabuwa of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now a person, now take it to the spiritual realm, a person may ask himself the question, well, I look in my heart, of course, I do believe that Isa is a prophet, but in my heart, is that feeling as strong as my belief that Sayyidina Rasulullah is a prophet? So sometimes when you do the spiritual check, you find, no, it's less. It's less. It's not mean I don't believe, I do believe that Isa is a Nabi, but I also believe Sayyidina Rasulullah is a Nabi. And in my heart, have I done this? La nufarriku. That we don't make any distinction. Look in your spiritual heart. Maybe you say yes, right? In terms of your Iman, now love is different. We will love the Prophet more than the other Anbiya. But even your Iman, your certainty. And then there's some Anbiya that are also ghaib. There's so many Anbiya, we don't even know their names, but we have to believe in them, right? There's just 25 or 30 whose names have come, approximately 25 to 30 whose names have come in Qur'an and Hadith. And Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in one narration, and there are several narrations with different numbers, in one narration mentioned that there were 120,000 Anbiya. So that means you believe in the Nabi whose name you don't even know with as much Iman as you believe in Sayyidina Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You see, now I showed you a spiritual aspect of the workshop, I showed you the textual aspect of the workshop, right? Okay. So then historically, if a person said, well, what does that mean? So you could go back and maybe read some text by, let's say, Imam Ghazali or some earlier scholar, how they talk about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. When you read that, you'll get a feeling, okay, that's what it means. The way they're talking about Isa alayhi salam, the feeling that is clearly in their heart, when they write like that, that's the feeling I'm supposed to have in my heart about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. Alright? Okay, next slide. Surah Al-Anfal, verse number 2. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Okay, so it means that indeed who are the believers? That when Allah is mentioned in front of them, their hearts tremble and quiver. Maybe their hearts flutter out of love, or their hearts tremble out of fear. Both meanings are there. Again, now, this is again the knob, right? Allah Ta'ala just said tremble. Why are their hearts trembling? It could be fluttering out of love. It could also be trembling out of fear. Both meanings are there. So multiplicity of meaning is embedded into the Qur'an and Hadith texts. But then another thing we find out here is what? Zadathum imana, that their iman gets ziyada. It becomes mazid, it increases. That's another thing to put in a workshop. The iman is apparently something that can increase. It's not static. There's a notion of increase in iman, right? Now that is going to work against the tongue argument, because when you just say it on your tongue, well, that's just a single static expression and utterance. There's no question of increase and decrease in that. You just said the sentence once, right? So now you see certain elements of the workshop will support one of those four positions more, and certain of those positions won't know how to handle certain parts of this workshop. Now what happens when that happens? So if there's a position and an advocate of that position, what is he supposed to do? So this is another thing. If you ever want to take in the intellectual approach side of it, you must have what's called intellectual honesty. You must honestly acknowledge there's something in the workshop that my position doesn't correspond with my position. But unfortunately, people who don't have that intellectual honesty, they have intellectual dishonesty, they'll hide that from their pamphlet. They'll give you a presentation of Iman and only including those parts of the workshop that support their position that Iman is only from the tongue. And they will hide those verses and hadith and all the parts of the workshop that go against their position. So this is a perfect example. This is one of the things that in the classical scholar tradition went against this position, that Iman is just in the tongue, because there's no concept of ziyada, no concept of increase then. Alright? Okay, to show you just a few more. This is a very commented verse of Quran al-Karim. قالت الأعراب آمنا. That the Arabi was the desert Bedouin nomad. So they started saying what? They started saying, Amanna, that we have Iman. So Allah Ta'ala told the Prophet, Qul, Lam tu'minu, walakin kulu aslamna. Don't say that you have Iman, rather say that you have Islam. Ya Allah, up till now, most people thought Iman and Islam were the same thing, right? Here Allah Ta'ala is using the word Iman and Islam in contrast with each other. I remember when I studied this in tafsir, there were 8 positions that I can recall right now of ulama. What's the difference between Iman and Islam? This is another question they raised. So what was Iman? What is Islam? I'm showing you what goes on in Ilm al-Kalam. I'm giving you this introductory tour of theology. What's the difference between those two? What does it mean that they can't say Amanna, they should only say Aslamna? What does that mean? When will they be able to say Amanna? The Islam is before and Iman is later. To give you one example, which would be just one example, that one of the positions was that Islam and Iman actually mean identical things when used separately. But when Allah Ta'ala uses them together in a single verse of Qur'an, and He's contrasting them like this, in that context, Iman is referring to the inner yaqeen in the heart of a person, the inner aspect of deen, and Islam is referring to the outward compliance and practice of a person, the outward aspect of deen. So it means that these people must have started praying salah, paying zakah, they were doing the outward practices, but they had not yet developed that full feeling of yaqeen in their heart. That full feeling of yaqeen also again suggests that Iman is gradated, that there's ziyada, what we call that there's tanqeed, there can be less and there can be more Iman. All of these things are things that was discussed. So what did Allah Ta'ala say? وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلُ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. That Iman has not yet entered your heart. Iman has not entered where? Iman has not entered where? Your heart. So what does that do for the tongue position? Allah Ta'ala is saying, don't say you have Iman, because Iman has not entered your heart. So it makes it quite clear that Iman is where? In the heart. Iman is where? Iman is in the heart. Okay, where did the tongue position come from? I don't know if that's coming, how much I got for you in this presentation, but there's a hadith where the Prophet said that Iman is to profess with your tongue, the Shahada. Iman is to profess, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, end of hadith, right? Now what you have to be very careful, like I told you, this will be called selective quotation from the workshop. This happens for two reasons. Most people do it because they have limited knowledge of the workshop. They don't know. And a lot of your popular speakers on TV are guilty of this. It's just ignorance. They don't know the whole workshop. So because they don't know the whole workshop, they come up with a skewed and incorrect and incomplete understanding of deen. And there's some people who are even worse. They know the whole workshop, like I told you, but then they hide the things that don't support their position, right? So that would be just quoting the hadith. So somebody, why is Iman just from the tongue? So again, take back that position. So if they go to some uncle, so they say, uncle, I want to marry this girl from America. The uncle says, it's okay, son. Okay, nephew. Why? He says, because look, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that Iman says that all you have to do is say this sentence. So the boy, oh, he quoted a hadith. So he looks at the reference in the footnote. Don't be won over just by references and footnotes. Everyone will give you a reference and footnote. So the uncle will tell that boy, so the boy will think it's fine. The boy will genuinely think, the boy is not genuine. The uncle was disingenuine. Now the uncle should have done his duty, should realize that this is not my game. I can't play with the workshop because I don't know the workshop. How can I tell you, oh nephew of mine, what Iman is? In order to know what Iman is, you have to know the whole workshop. I don't have that knowledge, you have to go to a scholar. But the Desi uncle doesn't do that. Some of them, not all are like that. But there's a particular mentality. I used to call it Desi uncle mentality. There's a particular mentality that some of them have to deen, is that whatever limited knowledge I know is sufficient to give rulings. They say, no, and he'll show them the hadith. Now the poor fellow, he sees hadith, he loves the Prophet ﷺ, he believes in the Prophet ﷺ, says the Prophet ﷺ, he goes back so happy. That, Anna, you can just say this sentence and you're good to go. My uncle just showed me a hadith of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, that all you have to do is profess it with your tongue. Now you see what goes on, right? You see what goes on. All right, let's see some more things from the workshop. All right. This is a hadith of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this hadith was used by those people who felt, rather we would say this hadith was read and understood by those people who felt actions must be part of Iman. Why? Because Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? That the person who commits zina does not do zina in a state that they're a believer. So what does it mean? It has something to do. Now Iman is being linked with what? Actions. Presence of Iman with here absence of Iman, absence of action, absence of obedience to Allah Ta'ala, but just stay away from zina, is being told as absence of Iman. If the Deus disobey Allah, they're not doing it, but huwa mu'min. They're not doing it in a state of Iman. Right? But this then poses another problem. That if you say that, then who's going to remain in Iman? Right? Almost everybody is a sinner. So if I say now again you turn the knob here. If I say it is just about zina, one possible. If I turn the knob at 1, by zina means any kabira guna, kabair, major sin. Turn the knob at 3, it can mean any sin. Remember the knob? The knob also is in play. Everything is going on here, right? Depends. You take it only literally as just zina. You turn the knob 1, it's a sin as big as zina and other sins as big as it kabair. Or you turn the knob at 3, any sin. If you turn the knob at 3 and you say a person at any time they do sin, they're not a mu'min while they're doing it. So this is a strange thing. Then what does it mean? Iman can come and go? Does he have to say shahada again? How does he get the iman again? Is it just leave as soon as he stops zina, he becomes a mu'min again? What happens? You need to investigate. There's some understanding, right, that has to be taking place. This is all what I'm telling you. And all of this is there, by the way. There's nothing I'm telling you that pages upon pages have not been written about this. This is what the Islamic scholarly tradition is, and this is what the vast majority of educated people have been kept from. You've been dumbed down in your deen. You have been only taught O levels of Islamiyat, where again you're just told about 5 pillars and 4 khulafas, and that's it. You haven't been exposed to the Islamic scholarly tradition at all. Even the small glimpse I'm giving you, your educational system doesn't even give you this much of a glimpse. Allahu Akbar Kabira. So it's a question. It's a question. This is another thing. So our actions are part of Iman. Keep going. Then in another hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Iman has several branches. This one says 60 plus branches, 60 odd branches. There's another hadith that says 70 odd branches. So this suggests that Iman is divisible. Iman is components. What does it mean? If you have all of them, then you have Iman. Where do you find these 60 branches? It's not this hadith. Again, you're going to have to go to the workshop. You start counting up your texts and say, okay, in this verse, this is mentioned, this hadith, this is mentioned. If you were to do that, you would cross 60. If I had the whole workshop in front of you and you count up every single thing that is mentioned as Iman in every verse and every hadith, you'll cross 70, you'll cross 80. Then you'll be wondering that, okay, all those things, which of them are the quote-unquote branches and which of them aren't branches? Questions? All of this has been talked about and written about. And this is I told you, we spent a few months learning this in the madrasa. I'm also showing you what is taught in the madrasas. I learned this in the madrasas of Pakistan. I don't learn this in Chicago and Oxford. I learned all of this, what I'm telling you, in the madrasas of Pakistan. Allahu Akbar Kabira. All right? Okay, okay, now we come to the multiplicity of meaning. Now I can show you the next two very quickly. I've done this for you. Multiplicity of meanings is done. Building the workshop is done. Positions on Iman, heart plus tongue, heart plus tongue plus actions. All right. Now, there's more. Let me show you more. This was one position. Second position was when it said that Iman increases. So what does it mean? Does Iman increase and decrease quantitatively or qualitatively? This is a huge discussion. Now I'll give you a couple of names so you have an idea. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala believes that Iman increases quantitatively, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala believed that Iman increases qualitatively. So all the texts that talk about ziyada, zadatum imana, it means qualitatively means the strength of your Iman, the passion of your Iman goes up. Quantitatively means no, your actually Iman units go up. So you have 10 units of Iman, you have 30 units of Iman, you have 50 units of Iman. Okay, now first thing I will show you. So the first question here is tongue. Is tongue alone okay or not? So now what you do is round 2, after you build the workshop, engage the workshop, come up with the first set of multiple meanings and positions that could be reasonably argued from the workshop. Now you have to engage in round 2, in the analytical understanding. Round 2 is you now have to play these positions off each other. You have to comparatively assess these positions. To do that, there's a third concept, which is called the box. Now that I couldn't figure out how to do for you in PowerPoint but maybe tomorrow one of these boys will make it for you. What you do is, I'll give you we don't have a board here either. Basically it's a term I created to explain to you what's done in the Islamic tradition of ulama. What we do is we run the box on the positions. Box means, imagine there's a box. So the position goes in the box. So box 1 has the word heart in it. Box 2 has the word tongue in it. If you look at the slide, box 3 has the word heart plus tongue in it, and box 4 has the heart plus tongue plus actions in it. So there are 4 boxes. First thing what you do when you run the box is you look at what are all the things that led to the box. So I draw a whole bunch of arrows leading to the box. What are the textual evidences? What is the reasoning? What are the arguments that led to this position? Now we're going to compare those with each other. Which one is stronger? Which one seems to be more reasoned? Which is more well argued? Which one seems to be more grounded in the text? Which positions came from leaving the knob at 0? Which came at turning the knob to 1? Which came from turning the knob to 2 or 3? You understand? We're going to tag and understand and dissect all of the arguments, evidences, reasoning, understandings, interpretations that led to the position that's in the box. That's first step of running the box when you're comparing the positions. Second step is now I would draw arrows coming out of the box. Now we're going to run the box in the second way. What? That if I accept this position, then what are the necessary logical consequences of accepting that? I mean, if I define Iman as tongue, what consequences would that have on deen? If I define Iman as heart plus tongue plus actions, what consequences would that have on deen? I have to flush out, extract, extrapolate all of the consequences that this position would have on deen. And then when I do that, then again I have to compare those consequences. That from those consequences, is there anything that seems to be against some other texts? This was the Iman workshop. There are many other workshops. There's another workshop going, what is Ihsan? There's another workshop team working on what is Islam? There's another workshop working on what are so many things. So is there any consequence, result of any of the 4 positions that is unacceptable in deen? If the consequence and implications are unacceptable, that will make me downgrade the position. So, and I keep running the box. This goes on for multiple rounds, running the box. Then what happens is when you do this, what I'm calling running the box, you may still end up with multiple positions. You may be able to eliminate 1 or 2. You still have more than 1. Now, as a practical reality, on some things you have to decide. So take that case again. I have to tell that boy, can you marry that girl or not? So he comes to me. He says, I heard you're a mufti. I say, yes. He says, I want a fatwa. I said, what? I want to marry this girl. I want to marry this girl. Now, she's told me she's atheist, but she's willing to recite the kalima. Can I marry her? Now, if I teach him this, if I say, okay, listen to my first day lecture I gave, he'll go crazy. He said, look, I want to know yes or no. Most people, when they ask a fatwa, they want to know yes or no. It's because you people want that the mufti always tells you things in black and white, because you can't handle the color. You can't handle the color picture. We give you monochrome picture. Because you're not trained enough, you're not skilled enough, you don't have enough hilm, zarf, tahammul to understand. Imagine if I told this kid all these things. He would walk away confused. And the danger of the confusion is he might walk away from deen. He would say, I thought my deen would guide me. I thought deen would tell me, can I marry this girl or not? I truly want to do what's pleasing to Allah Ta'ala. I went to the mufti because I wanted to please Allah Ta'ala, because I didn't want to disobey Allah Ta'ala. And he couldn't give me the answer. He couldn't give me the answer whether I could marry the girl or not. So when it comes to fatwa, when it comes to court ruling, when it comes to the qazi, the mufti, you have to decide. And it's exactly the same in all of Western law. The judges can write all types of, and professors of law write all types of articles on criminal law and criminal justice and sentencing in the legal journals. And they'll have all types of discussions in the law schools and classrooms and all types of debates in the conferences. But when it comes down to it, the judge has to issue one sentence. He has to pick, he has to decide, he has to issue a ruling. Now when the judge issues the ruling, it doesn't mean he's negating all legal thought. It doesn't mean that all professors are out the door, all other people, but he had to necessarily, in the courtroom, issue one single legal ruling. Otherwise, justice would never occur. There will be no concept of the law. So that boy has to be given an answer. Can he marry that girl or not? So then what happens is then there's a way. So the first thing is that when you run the box and you comparatively assess the positions, you might be able to eliminate some. If you eliminate all except one, so you're good to go, right? But sometimes, even when you run the box, you end up with still more than one position. So then there's a second phase of activity that takes place. That is called reconciliation. How do you resolve and reconcile this multiplicity? So there are two ways I will show you, right, that this is done. I'm going to show you all of this as an example. One is called tatbiq and one is called tarjih. Tatbiq means that, okay, now, can I come up with some other position? Can I make another position, which is an overarching position that somehow encompasses all of the positions that I have? can I come up with some interpretive understanding? In fencing, they call it hermeneutics. You don't need to know that. Some interpretive understanding, some overarching interpretation that can take all of these positions along. That's called tatbiq. And if I can't do that, then can I do tarjih? Tarjih means that can I elevate and select one on the basis of some legitimate preference. It can't be arbitrary. It can't be, for example, or whatever's easier. This is another mistake people have. Well, just pick the position that's easier. No, you can't do that in deen. You have to be honest. You have to try your best to figure out what truly Allah Ta'ala wants. So you may have to pick one, but you have to pick one on the basis of some legitimate criteria of preference. This is not a legitimate criteria of preference to simply pick whatever's easy. Right? For that boy, the easiest thing is for me to tell him, just go out and marry her. I can't do that. Why can't I do that as a mufti? Because I'm putting my neck out for him on the Day of Judgment. On the Day of Judgment, if Allah Ta'ala asks him, why did you marry her? He's going to present me. He goes, Allah Ta'ala, I went to this person. He said he was the mufti of your deen. He told me I could marry her. That's why I married her. I'm not willing. Other muftis might be. I'm not willing to put my neck out on the Day of Judgment for anyone and everyone. Not like that. Right? Not like that. Not like that. All right, so now I'm going to run the box for you. Now I'm going to run the box for you on these positions. All right. First thing, when we looked at the first running the box, which was looking at the evidences and arguments and reasonings that went into the position, in light of the entire workshop, the tongue position was discarded by the Islamic scholarly tradition. There was a very minor group known as Karamiya. They selected this tongue position. There were a handful of people and they died out in 1 or 2 generations. And I already gave you a taste of that, right? That, for example, Allah Ta'ala says in Qur'an that Iman has not yet entered your heart. So for them to say, because again, remember defining is about borders. The tongue position is saying is tongue and not heart. You have to flush it out, right? But it means tongue only and not heart. That's what it should say if you flush it out. And sometimes always remember that in language you have to flush it out in order to compare to the sets of positions. So this position, tongue only and not heart, that wasn't supported by the workshop, and there were so many Quranic texts that went against that, and so many hadith where the Prophet also mentions the word qalb and heart, so the tongue position was taken out. Tongue position was taken out. So now you're left with 3. You're left with 3. I mean, if I was on the board, I would erase it for you. You're left with 3. Now, all 3 have heart, the ones that are left, right? Heart only, heart and tongue and actions. So now we don't have to really look at the workshop anymore about this issue of heart, right? Because all 3 of them are agreeing that Iman does lie in the heart. So that's agreement, we're done. So now we know for sure Iman definitely is something in the heart. The question is, does it also require to be professed with the tongue? And does it also require actions? So when we ran now let me show you the other side of the box, to flush out the logical consequences and implications. So let's take that other position, heart plus tongue plus actions. Now what happened was the Islamic scholars ran the implications on this. They said, but this has serious implications. Because that means, for example, somebody who doesn't pray, he doesn't have Iman. I'll have to say he's a non-believer, right? Somebody who doesn't do this. There's so many actions, so many amal in our deen. That was being figured out by the other workshop team that was doing What is Islam? Remember? The other What is Islam team came up with this huge list of actions. They passed it over to us. We saw this huge list of actions. And then when they did the What is Sin, when they looked at that hadith about adultery and thieving, so they came up with the whole list of sins. So that means if I take position 3, that heart plus tongue plus actions equals Iman, then a person has to be doing all of this and not doing all of that, and only then I will say that I have Iman. So the implications of that were very difficult. That would lead to a very, 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 very narrow definition of Iman. And that narrow definition of Iman, that spirit of such narrowness, was not borne out by the text in the workshop. So we also look at the letter and the spirit. But always remember, this is also a mistake to think that spirit is easy and letter is difficult. It's not like that. We will generally look at the letter and the spirit. Sometimes the letter is difficult, the spirit is easy. So most of the time the spirit is more difficult and the letter is easy. How to do nikah, you just have to say a few words. That's the letter of the law. But to really have the spirit of marriage in Islam is very difficult. Don't think spirit of Islam is easier than letter of Islam. The spirit of Islam is much, much more difficult than the letter of Islam. That's coming later. Spirit, spiritual, and the sessions on spirituality. All right. So the heart plus tongue plus actions would put to the side. We couldn't throw it out entirely because there were many texts from the workshop that did suggest actions. So we put a question mark on it, that we can't accept this position, but what are we going to do about those texts that talk about actions as part of Iman? We can't figure something out. So we put it to the side. Then what was left were the two things, heart only and heart plus tongue. So then the Islamic tradition said that, okay, here we will do the tatbiq. We will take heart plus tongue, because there were some texts in the workshop that talked about the tongue. And the notion is that true Iman lies only in the heart. The Iman itself, so this is the tatbiq, they're reconciling between these two positions. Iman itself lies in the heart, but Islam, the deen of Islam, the Sharia, requires that a person should profess it with their tongue, except in extremely rare circumstances. So there's extremely rare circumstances that somebody says, okay, if you accept Islam, I'll kill you, right? So that, let's say like there was a time like that, mushrikeen parents in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so that person would be allowed to accept Iman in their heart, but keep it secret, right? To accept Iman in the heart, but keep it secret, not profess it with their tongue, right? But other than those exceptional circumstances, a person should profess Iman. They should self-identify themselves as a faithful believer, because the deen of Islam requires that. For example, if she doesn't identify herself as a believer, nobody will marry her, right? She needs to identify herself as a believer, people will marry her. He needs to identify himself as a believer, so he pays zakat. Otherwise we won't know he should be paying zakat, right? Okay? So Iman itself lies in the heart, but the deen wants it should be expressed with the tongue. So those two are reconciled. We were still left with that issue of the question mark over actions, right? What did we do with the actions? So the tatbiq here, the way these two positions were reconciled was the following, that a'mal are, I will say it in Arabic, then I will say it in English, a'mal are not ajza'i hakiki of Iman. A'mal are ajza'i muhsana of Iman. It means actions are not actually constituent parts of Iman. Rather, actions are the way you adorn your Iman. Actions are the way that you get that ziyada. Because there was that concept of Iman becoming stronger or weaker. So actions have to do with the strength or weakness of Iman. So that brought those texts of the workshop back into it. So then what we did is we were able to reconcile, we had to eliminate the tongue position because it just was not borne out by the workshop. But we were able to reconcile all three of the remaining positions as follows, that the reality of Iman is in the heart only. However, the deen, for many reasons, requires the person should profess that Iman in their tongue. And the role of actions have a role in Iman, but the role of actions isn't about the existence or absence of Iman. The role of actions is that ziyada that is mentioned in many texts, that increase in Iman. Alright? And the only thing that was left as a slight difference was that when you do a'mal, does it increase your Iman quantitatively or does it increase your Iman qualitatively? That was a difference that was completely tolerable and doesn't cause problems, so we maintain the multiplicity there. It's not always a quest for elimination, for unicity. We can maintain a certain level of multiplicity, and right up till today, in the Sunni Islamic tradition, there are some scholars who believe a'mal increase Iman quantitatively, and some who believe a'mal increase Iman qualitatively, and ultimately it doesn't actually make a difference. It doesn't have any implications and consequences for any aspect of our deen. So this was a behind-the-scenes tour of one aspect. There's so much more on this question of what is Iman, and there's so much more in the workshop, and there were so many more positions, and there were so many arguments that led to those positions. There were so many more consequences. There are so many more ways that those things were comparatively assessed. But like I told you, I wanted to give you a feel for what exactly happens in this area of Islamic theology. The next slide is talking about the boundaries of Iman. So you can just show the whole slide. So in boundaries of Iman, you will basically talk about three possible things. One is inclusivism. That, okay, everybody has Iman. Everybody who self-describes himself as a Muslim has Iman. Then there's a notion of exclusivism. It doesn't mean to exclude everyone, but that there will be certain people who will be excluded from having Iman. So one important case I will tell you is that there's one example of this that all of the Sunni and Shi'i ulama have agreed upon historically and currently, is that if anyone believe, any human being in history or present or future, if any human being in past, present or future believes that any other human being, anyone believes in any other human being as a prophet, as a nabi, in any sense of the meaning, real nabi, shadow nabi, partial nabi, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that person cannot be considered, they will be excluded from Iman. To believe in another prophet after Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your voluntary choice to believe, a person's voluntary choice to believe in that, means that belief puts them outside of Iman. Whether that other prophet's name was Musaylatul Kazab, whether that other prophet was Bahauddin, the founder of the Baha'i faith, whether that prophet is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani, it doesn't matter. It's something personal for us. And there have been many, many others in history, and there may yet be more to come in the future. Any person who believes that anyone after Sayyidina Rasulullah is a Nabi or a Prophet, that person is excluded from Iman. Alright? Now when you exclude them from Iman, that doesn't automatically mean you can do violence again. No, it doesn't mean that. It's a non-violent exclusion. We can live with them as fellow citizens, we have no problem. You can be fellow citizens in Pakistan, completely peaceful way, with a Christian, with a Jew, with an atheist, with a Hindu, with a Buddhist, with an agnostic, with a Qadiani. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference to us as far as mutual, peaceful coexistence as fellow citizens of one country and one state. However, when it comes to Iman, any person who chooses to believe in another prophet, they will be excluded from Iman. And this isn't just an Islamic principle, this is a principle that all religions follow. If a Christian in America meets me, they will call me a non-Christian. I won't be offended by that. I won't say you've offended my human rights. I say it's a factual statement. A Jew in America calls the Christians in America a non-Jew. They say, you're a non-Jew. So the Christian says, why? Me and you, we share so many things in common. He says, yes. We both believe in the Old Testament. He says, yes. But the difference is that you believe that Isa alayhi salam is a son of God, or even if you believed him as a prophet, and we believe Moses was the last and final prophet, that you're a non-Jew, you're a Christian. In the United States, if I open up a masjid and I call it a Catholic church, this will not be called freedom of religion. This is not called freedom of expression. I will not be allowed to do that. I said, no, I believe in Isa alayhi salam. I believe that the Bible was read by Allah Ta'ala, but yes, there's some problems on the one they print in America, but I believe in the original Bible. They say, you're not Catholic. You're a Muslim. I say, no, I want to call myself Catholic. They say, you can't. I say, it's my freedom of expression. They say, you can't. I say, it's freedom of assembly. I want to call my masjid Catholic Church of America. You can't. You can't. Why? Because you believe in an additional prophet beyond Catholicism. You cannot use the word Catholicism. You cannot call yourself Catholic Church of America. You can't do that. It has nothing to do with human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You can understand now why I'm telling you this. All right? But that doesn't mean we're advocating, we have 100% belief that we can live with any non-Muslim absolutely peacefully. And there's so many, and in now historical approach, in the history of Islam, in the Ottoman Empire, Andalus Empire, Mughal Empire, Safavid Empire, Seljuk Empire, you're talking about centuries. Centuries. The United States has been a superpower after World War II. That's not even 1 century yet. Ottoman Empire was a superpower for 4 or 5 centuries. Andalus was a superpower for 3 or 4 centuries. And in those massive centuries-long rule, complete peaceful coexistence with non-Muslims is not an issue. Yes, there were episodes, and those episodes were wrong. There was a very small, minor episodes occasionally in history, and that was viewed as wrong. Jews will tell you, Jewish historians write, that until the modern state of Israel, the best position the Jews ever had was either as Jewish citizens of Andalus before the Spanish Inquisition, or as Jewish citizens of the Ottoman Empire. Hindus in the Mughal Empire, and there were a bit more than a few, unfortunately, violence against Hindus. But other than that, it wasn't massive violence. It wasn't only violence. For the vast majority of the history of the Mughal, which were technically Muslim empire, Hindus were able to live in peace under Mughal Muslim rule. The vast majority of history is that, and the vast 99% of Hindus live peacefully. Yes, some were victims of unlawful, illegitimate violence. All right? But the fact that unlawful, illegitimate violence exists against social reality, so that social reality, I'll bring that last mention in, so that will make us careful how we talk about this, right? We don't want to use inflammatory words. We don't want to use hateful speech. That will inform us to make sure that we say that by believing that somebody who doesn't believe in another prophet is not a Muslim, doesn't mean that we're saying you can burn them, kill them, attack them, discriminate against them. No. So we have to take into account the social reality and make sure we frame the discussion in light of that social reality, and to be careful that there's no negative repercussion from our theological belief in the social reality, social fabric of this country. But at the same time, Iman is what it is, and believing in another prophet no longer entitles you to call yourself a Muslim. All right? We can't compromise on that either. All right? So these are very delicate things I'm talking to you about. Very delicate, sensitive things. And most people in Pakistan don't have the ability to handle and navigate these topics with that delicacy. Again, why? Because they don't do the historical, spiritual, and intellectual approach. Because they don't have the analytical understanding. They can't handle multiplicity of meaning. They don't build, they don't know the workshop. They don't know about the knob. They don't run the box. They don't do these things. They don't do these things. All right? So this was a notion of theology, right? There was another thing I thought of doing for you, but I won't be able to explain that to you because of shortage of time. So I can direct you to a reading, because this is a book that has been published by Oxford University Press, Pakistan. So Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala wrote a book. In Arabic it's called Faisal at-Tafriqa. Faisal at-Tafriqa. Which basically, in English, the translator is translated, so let me give you that because you will have to search it on this title. Boundaries of Theological Tolerance. Boundaries of Theological Tolerance. And this was translated by a Muslim American convert. He's an African American. Sherman Jackson is his birth name. And in Muslim circles, he goes by Abdul Hakim Jackson. He's a professor of Islamic studies in the US. And he translated this from the Arabic into English. And interestingly enough, it was printed by Oxford University Press, Pakistan, as opposed to anywhere else. And it's available in America, but this print is exported there. If you buy it in America, you will see it's the one that's printed in Pakistan. All right? Imam al-Ghazali, I'll just very briefly tell you, but because that book is available for you, those of you can read that, he also talks very interestingly about this third thing that if you go back to that slide, which is pluralism and tolerance. Right? How do you navigate this social reality of multiplicity? That's called pluralism, right? There's more than one sect of Aqidah. There's more than one theological sect out there in the whole Muslim Ummah and in every Muslim country. How do you do that? How do you set boundaries? How do you have tolerance? I personally feel that Imam al-Ghazali's approach is correct, but to do justice on that, I don't have time, and since the book is available to you in English, you can read that. I will just give you one element of his approach, and one central core aspect of his approach is focusing on Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his nubuwwah, his prophet and prophecy. And one of the things he mentions is that anybody who accepts the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet, and last and final, perfect, complete prophet, and doesn't have any belief which somehow suggests that they don't believe in the perfection, completion, finality of prophethood, and they believe in Allah Ta'ala and the Qur'an, he says that's sufficient. And interestingly, Imam al-Ghazali was living at a time where no matter what the English media may make you think, there was much more sectarianism in the middle period of Islam. And in fact, when Islam was at that height of knowledge and astronomy and invention and discovery, that was also the height of sectarianism in Islam. And he was living in a city of Baghdad, which is extremely cosmopolitan and had many sects in it. Many denominations and many religions and many faiths and atheist philosophers, and everything was there. So he wrote at a time responding, so now the historical part, that I accept that many of this particular book of his, some people have said, is limited to, he wrote for his particular historical context. But I feel that if our current context actually resembles that historical context, so there's no harm in being guided and informed by a past thinker when we find our current condition to be similar to the one that he was in. But I leave that up to you, so you can obtain that book. And it's readily, it's not like it's out of stock, it's readily available at the OUP bookstores, last time I checked, and also online for ordering. And you can read it, and you will find a very interesting discussion there about this notion of tolerance, pluralism, and tolerance. And maybe perhaps some other time in life, inshallah ta'ala, we might give you a short one-day seminar just on that text. Okay? The last thing to do for you before we take a break. The second thing I wanted to show you basically was an introduction to ethics, but the reality is that is actually an entire lecture in of itself. But similarly, what I would have done for you is basically shown you how the Islamic tradition, using all of these approaches now I showed to you, addresses the question of what is ethical and what is moral behavior, and the interaction between ethics and law. So I'm going to pause over here. I'm going to table that, and if ever we get a chance sometime later, today or in any other session when we have some leftover time, I will try to return to this topic and do this for you, which is this brief introduction, and I'll do very briefly a brief introduction to ethics in our deen. Alright, so this concludes our first session.